When when you're choosing which arts materials or methods to use, how do you make that decision?
So usually, we want to support children's sense of agency. In our daily practice, if you come into KU Bradfield Park, what you see is the dedicated art space being fully set up. By saying that, it means the easels, watercolor paint, chalk, charcoal, clay, collage materials, natural loose part. They are always there for children to explore, so they are very familiar with those materials and how to use them. So
Mm.
when the project comes around, children, they have their little discussion, and then they will decide which one they are going to use to articulate their thinking, to express meaning.
When they maybe aren't as familiar with materials, perhaps at the beginning of the year, or if they're new to the centre, how do you support children to develop that relationship with materials or that awareness of what the materials are and what they can do? Do you always do that in project work, or do you do a lot of groundwork around introducing materials, explaining processes, that sort of thing, to sort
Yes,
of give them the repertoire that they can draw from?
yes,
Mm.
yes. That's what our daily practice all about.
Yes. Yeah.
So we at the Long Day Care Center. So baby room, infant room, they spend time to explore the textures and the colors.
Mm-hmm.
So are the toddlers, and so I really believe that if we set up the environment with different art materials and medium for them to explore, it's more like a practice for them. So during those practice, they exactly know they're practicing the technique.
Mm.
So with the watercolor palettes, what can they do with them? And then if you're adding the salting, what effect it creates?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do with the ink? How about you using the ink with the stick? Does it make the line look a bit interesting?
Yeah.
How about you using the brush? And does it make the line look a bit different? These kind of things. And then when we spend time with the children, we notice this the metaphor languages that children are using when they explore different mediums and engaging with different textures and colors. So, and I really think those daily visual arts practice by exploring and investigating, that sets a solid foundation for project.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I think.
Yeah,
So
I agree completely. I love that you've articulated it so well because, we expect sometimes I think people jump into project work without thinking about that intentional
yeah,
um, planning, not just around everything a medium or a material can do in one sitting, but that real scaffolding from when children are very young all the way through their time in early childhood. And I think a lot of educators get stuck with how to program and plan for visual arts learning, and yet to deconstruct all of the possibilities with one material and spend rich time in that relationship or building that relationship with the materials, that can be your program for a whole month, that children can be support. For example, if you're introducing clay in the baby's room, then it shouldn't ever just be my belief is that it shouldn't ever be a one-off entertainment activity. It should be a dialogue with that material that's built and scaffolded across time, so that then it becomes part of the child's vocabulary, that they can then use when they are wanting to not just explore a material, but to go the next step, which is about using that material as a language, to make sense of their worlds, to explore their worlds, but also to communicate their thinking, which is what is such an important part of projects of inquiry, is building that platform.
so we never do kind of just putting the watercolor out for 2 weeks and then we pack them up and then we get another
Mm.
painting out. It's not like a thing. But
Mm.
it has to always be there in the space, so they can choose, they can practice, they finding new technique, they finding new effects that they can create. I
Mm.
think this is wonderful. And then through those visual arts experience of exploring and investigating the medium and the art materials, the textures, children, they are building connections, they're building their relationship
Yeah.
through those day-to-day practice.
Well,
So
and I
yeah,
think they're also developing the self-regulation skills and the care for the materials and that respect for the environment. They're all things that don't happen overnight. They happen through repeated experience with the staff being present, being really engaged. And I think a lot of educators potentially put materials on a table, and then when everything ends up tipped out and spilled over, they say, oh, that didn't work, instead of realizing that it only works effectively when you invest the time and build the repertoire, and through repeated consistent expectations that children are capable of using and caring for materials, that then they actually become responsible citizens in the classroom who use all of those resources in really powerful ways. So I love the intentionality about your work, because I think a lot of people could learn so much from that slow, deliberate, repetitious experience with these materials and methods and processes. So I think that's really exciting.
that's why we don't call it like the market store. Like you set them all up and then you left and then you just leave the children there to explore by themselves,
Yeah.
because they're still learning how
Mm.
this work with that. And then if you just leave the space,
Yeah. No
yes,
wonder it turns into a disaster sometimes, and people
yes,
say it didn't work, they made too much mess, they don't know this, they don't know that. Instead of saying, what are you capable of? Here, let me take you through this process. Let me model, let me demonstrate, let me celebrate your learning. And I love the way that when you're in a small group like that and consistently at an experience, the whole tone of the whole room calms down, because everyone is well occupied and engaged. And then children are teaching children. It's not just about you teaching them. They're actually learning by observing each other. And as you, as the educator, are noticing the brilliance of their discoveries, then everyone learns from that. So it sort of becomes a really beautiful community of practice, I think, where you're supporting children to learn not just as individuals, but in community, and in that sort of collaborative way.